Hey, what's going on? My name is Andrew Delgado. I was born and raised in Jamaica, Queens, New York. My whole family's Puerto Rican. I had 5 brothers, 3 sisters. We all grew up in a one-bedroom apartment. My mom, she was a single mom. She did what she had to do so we can eat at night, and a lot of times she couldn't make ends meet. And one night the cops came to our house, and they saw all the kids there with no supervision. There was no food, we had no blankets. So they took us all away, and one by one they started putting us all in different foster homes. They put us in group homes. And living in group homes and foster homes, I grew up being a very bitter kid. They separated all my brothers and sisters. We grew up not knowing each other. My father was back in Miami doing the best he could, trying to get us back, going to court and taking classes that he needed to take to be a better parent. When I was about 10 years old, he won some of the cases. He got 3 of us back. We moved back down to Miami, Florida. My dad was an honest man. He worked hard, 12, 15-hour days. And I used to see how hard he would work, and he'd come home from work so tired and tell me to live right and do what's right and please God. And I looked how poor we were, and I looked at all the good he didn't amount to anything in my eyes. And I look across the street and I'd see the drug dealers over there, and I'd see the drug dealers, they had the money, man, they had the clothes, they had everything. And I look at what my father had, and he had nothing. And I had a choice to make. Am I gonna choose the right path and end up with nothing like my father did, or am I gonna choose this path? And I went the wrong way. I chose wrong. I ended up getting involved in a gang, and I remember the day I got into a gang, and I go, well, what do I got to do to be one of you guys? Because obviously that's the life I want to live. I see how much fun you guys are having. Nobody's going to mess with you guys. Yeah, I want to be one of you guys. And they said, well, you got to stand here and you got to take a beating for 2 minutes straight and not fall on the floor. And if you can do that, you'll be one of us. And I remember I stood there and I took that beating, and I took it like a man. And I remember I never felt so much love before. I was so tired of being rejected and moving from foster home to foster home. And later on, my mom ended up dying from cancer, and I just felt like, man, what kind of life am I gonna live, man? And I'm glad I'm a part of something where somebody loves me. And my life just started spiraling, man. I got caught up in drugs and the alcohol and the cocaine, and I needed cocaine just to get through the day. I love that rush, that feeling of just I have to go and do something. And that lifestyle leads you to prison and leads you to jail, and that's where I ended up. And I remember people would tell me all the time, man, go to God, man, he'll change your life. And I looked around, man, and I didn't want to be one of those guys that go to God just because I'm in trouble. Oh, now I'm in jail. I want to live the thug's life. I ended up getting out of jail. A couple months later, I was back in jail. I got back out again. I started robbing houses, and 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a jail cell. And the same gang that said they had my back and they're down for life, one by one, snitched everybody out. And the judge was talking about 10 years in prison, and I didn't want to live that life. And as I'm sitting there contemplating ways to kill myself and how to get out of this, I remember what my pastor told me when I was young. And he told me these words that I'll never forget. And he said, Andrew, Jesus loves you. And someone told me that all I had to do was say a prayer and tell Jesus to come into my heart and he'll save me. And I remember getting on my knees in my bunk with 80 people in my dorm. I had Jesus come into my heart, and my life was never the same. I'm thinking, man, I'm going home, man. God just changed me. He forgave me. And I sit in front of the judge, and he tells me the same thing he told me before. You do an armed robbery charge, you're going to prison. You rob houses, you're going to prison. And the next time I went to court, the judge offered me, it's called a 364 in jail, and a 15-month boot camp program in prison. And I said, man, I'll take it, man. Anything less than 10 years is awesome for me. And finally, the time came out for me to get out of jail. Thank God, man. And I remember getting out of jail. I promised I'd never come back. Man, it wasn't 2 weeks later till I got caught up with the old friends, got messed up on drugs, and ended right back up in jail. Next couple years of my life were the same way, in and out of jail, in and out, in and out, in and out. But one day, finally the last time I went to jail, it was probably when I was 21 years old. And finally, I told God, I'm going to stop playing. I told God that if you ever let me out, I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life. And when I said that, I think God knew I was serious. And when I got out of jail, I said I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. And then one day, I remember my pastor invited me to a church service, and I met a guy there, and his name was Pastor Arson, and he came down from Richmond. And man, I remember I saw this guy, and he had tattoos.
I remember Andrew when we first met him. We met him in Miami, Florida. Andrew was serious about what he did. If he was going to be doing gangster, he wanted to be the Scarface of gangsters. And when Andrew decided he wanted to be a Christian, then he wanted to be the Christian of Christians.
And he came in there, I remember him and this guy, they preached the gospel, they did a whole hip-hop concert, and I remember talking with him, and he told me about a pastor named Pastor Geronimo at the Richmond Outreach Center, and my pastor and Pastor G were best friends. They knew each other from way back when, and my pastor's whole mission was to get me to the rock.
A pastor friend of mine from Miami, Florida gave me a call and said he had a young man named Andrew who needed a place to go. And And after him telling me Andrew's story, I realized the Rock was the perfect place for him. So I called the pastor back and said, why don't you send him on up here to Richmond, Virginia? We'll take him in right away, plug him in the ministry, and get him serving God. And who would have known years later, Pastor Andrew would be one of my right-hand fellows that work for me, and serving the Lord every day here at the Rock is a big blessing, and has a sincere passion and heart for the Lord. And I'm so thankful that God allowed us to be a part of his life.
I ended up going to jail. I did about 8 more months. And while I was in jail, Pastor G sent me a letter. And in this letter, he said that he would do whatever it took to get me to Richmond, Virginia, because he felt like this is where God needs me to be. I moved in with Pastor Arson. I lived with him for probably about 2 or 3 years. And he trained me up to serve at the Richmond Outreach Center. Later on, I started working for Pastor G. I've been here about 6 years now in the ministry. And Pastor G needed a plan. He figured that I was going to get saved and serve the Lord and go back to Miami and start a church. So Pastor G needed a plan to keep me here in Richmond. So he hooked me up with this chick that was his sister-in-law, Chelsea. And he figured that's the best way to keep Andrew in Richmond was get him married to his family. So that's what he did. I met my wonderful wife here in the ministry. And we ended up getting married, and Pastor G married us. And I've been at the Rock now for 6 years. I get to work in the Spanish ministry. All the things that I worked for before I was saved to get, I wasn't able to get. And now that I serve Christ, I got 2 beautiful cars. I got a beautiful wife. I got a beautiful house. I got about 10 men and women living in my house that are coming off of drugs and alcohol. Some from foster homes just like I was. Some were abused just like I was. Didn't feel loved just like I was. And I'm able to give back. I work as Pastor G's assistant, helping him do whatever he needs. I get to work with great pastors, Pastor Ranch, Pastor Arson, Pastor Jason. I get to preach chapel to the disciples at RSUM. I get to lead soul winning ministries here at the Rock. I get to go to the jail ministries and preach to the kids in jail. And that's it, man. That's all I do. I don't do much. That's it, guys. I'm out. Peace.